Hello, and welcome to this Revit tutorial on Toposolids. In today's instruction, I'm going to demonstrate how to produce a site like this. Here's a sample sloping site. There is a driveway here into the site and parking stalls in front of these units. Units are 1 story on the front. On the rear end here, they're 2 stories tall, taking advantage of the topography. There's an existing building over here in the corner, and this is the site we're focusing on here. But obviously we want to include the context. So there's a street, sidewalks around the edges, and then this adjacent building and its own parking pad. So let's go through the steps of building this using Revit 2025's Toposolid command. I'm going to go New. File New, Project, and here I simply use a simplistic default template. Hit OK. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do is to have a site we can trace in Revit. Here's an example of the site. Now this is accessed through the GIS data downloaded from this county's website. Simply search for 2-foot contour map or plat GIS data to find these websites. And so the site in question is this one here. This is where we'll be building a development. That site right there. This picture was taken with the 2-foot topography. So for example, here you can see that this line here is at 820. This line here is at 840. Basically, you have a 10-foot drop between the dark lines. Every other intermediate topo line is a 2-foot interval. So we're going downhill here toward the street. And then I took a copy, I printed out the same PDF with or without the topography, but because it's nice to have a clean drawing without all those distracting topography lines. So the site in question is this one here. So there's an existing driveway here for this neighboring building here. And the site tapers downward toward the street here. You can kind of see the shadow line along that ridge there. And so it's nice to have a kind of before and after look with and without the topography turned on. So I saved both of those as PDF files. Let's put those aside. So using one of those PDF files, the one that has the measurements of the site, we can begin to trace the model using a Toposolid. So I'll go here to insert, and I'll insert a PDF. So for example, I go to link PDF, and I'll go fetch the PDF file. So here, for example, I'll grab this PDF here. That's the GIS printout as a PDF format here. I'll bring that PDF into Revit. Hit open. I'll use 150 DPI. You can go higher. It'll be less pixelated if you like. Let's go 300. Hit OK. I exported the PDF as 11 by 17 from the county website. So there's the PDF. Click. Escape. And if you look closer here, again, we're focused on this side here. Parcel B and parcel A. This area right here is what we're after. But because we want to build a column with the context around the building and the site, we want to include more of the environment. You know, let's build the entire plot around the building. So first of all, we want to make sure that the PDF is the right scale. So let's measure something. Let's grab a reference plane and let's draw a reference plane from one of these corners here. So for example, this corner here, I'll click and use my arrow keys and basically put at the end of that arrowhead there. And this edge of the site here is 262 feet, 0.65 to this point right there at the end of the arrowhead. So I'll grab that line there and I'll copy it over. Escape. I'll zoom in. I'll grab that line, use the arrow arrow keys on my keyboard, and I'll move it over to the arrowhead. Basically put it at the end of that line right there. So that measurement needs to be 262 feet and change. So if I do a distance or DI and I measure between this line and this line here, I'm at 29 feet. It's supposed to be 265.65 feet. So where is that? If I click on this reference plane and use the duplicate command and pick a point to start and point to the right, I can copy that line 262.65 feet toward my right. Just hit enter. And lo and behold, there is the correct measurement from this line here to this line there. That is correct at 262.65. There's a translation into inches. And so the task is to take this PDF and scale it up between these two lines here and have that dimension grow to this dimension here across that span there between that line and that line. So quick work of that in Revit. You click on the object, you go to the scale command here, and you use these two lines here to measure the existing conditions. Between this point and this point is 29'6", and then you pick the correct measurement. It's starting from the first point here. So from that point way over here, if I click on that green line there, click, the drawing grows to become that measurement. If I grab these reference planes and pull them down into the file here, if I zoom in and grab that little dot there, my mouse to zoom out here, I can confirm that it's correct size by pulling these little reference planes here with a little dot, pull them down to the site here and see, yeah, in fact, that's exactly where they should be. That's 265 feet long. I no longer need these lines here. I no longer need those lines there. I'll keep my elevation tags here for a second. I'm going to grab this and slide it over for 1 minute here. And next, I'm going to pin it to the screen so it doesn't move. Click on the object and use the pin command right there. And now it's stuck to the screen. I can no longer delete it, rotate it, move it by mistake. So this scale is now correct. This should be about 100 feet from 0 to 100 there. If I do a little measurement there, I can confirm that. If that's the case, it should be pretty close to about there. It's slightly off, but again, we can do better. We can go back to, we'll unpin this drawing and we'll make it a little bit more accurate. Unpin the drawing there, and let's use this bar here for the sake of measurement. So go to Architecture tab, and I can place this exactly right at 0, like in the center of that bar, and then I will copy this over to here. That should be 200 feet away, but I'm suspecting it's not. And again, that should be the correct distance, 200 feet. If I copy this over to the right, exactly 200 feet, you see it falls short. This measurement here, actually this would be more accurate than the actual map. You know, that's 100 feet. That's 200 feet right there to this green line here. So the drawing has to get slightly smaller. I could have done this from the beginning. I didn't realize it was here, but this image is unpinned. So I need to go from this line here, 0, to the incorrect measurement and scale it to the correct measurement, the third green line there, reference plane. So scale, grab the drawing, use scale command, measure what's incorrect, here to here is incorrect, and pull it back to the other one there. That's the correct measurement. Click, and lo and behold, it's exactly at 200 feet. We're going to say that's more accurate than the site plan. So I'm going to click on this here, and I'm going to pin it. So again, it doesn't move. Okay. So here's a site. Next step is to build what's called a toposolid. It'll be a 3D model of the surface of the land, and then we'll have to manipulate it to pick up the actual contours of the land so it becomes hilly. So under massing and site here, I'm going to go to the site plan level here. Here's site plan. The map was drawn on level 1. I'd like to see it on level site. So I can click on this. And let's go here to copy command. Under raster images, here's the copy command, the clipboard. I go to the site plan here. I go paste, but I use this one here called align to selected views. And the view I will align it with is the site plan view. It'll make a copy in the exact same position. Click on this one and pin it. So now I have this map on the first floor plan and the site plan. The site plan here, this view, is basically 200 feet in the air looking straight down on top of the site. I know that here because if I go to here, the view range, under extents, view range here, it says that I am looking here, I'm on level 1, 200 feet above level 1 in the sky, looking down to level below, whatever below level 1, and 0. So I'm 200 feet in the air, looking down between 200 feet and 0 level. This image is now planted on the screen. Massing in sight, here's Toposolid. Let's make sure the model category is turned on. VG, or visibility graphics. Click on any item, type T for topo, scroll down. Toposolid is checked. So it will be visible. So with this object pinned, I'll go to the Toposolid and I will create from a sketch. And then with that, I'll use a rectangle and I will trace, slightly bigger than the entire site. I will trace the entire site here. And I will accept it. So there's the Toposolid. If I go to 3D, it's there. Right there. Now, that's a 3D surface that currently is flat. And we're gonna give it more thickness. Let's take a look at the Toposolid here. Click on it, edit type, and you see the Toposolid is comprised of, under structure, these elements. It's like a floor in Revit, a layer of grass, a layer of gravel, and the earth beneath. Now, I'm going to give myself some additional room for the earth, make it deeper, since the site, if I take a look at the map here, the site seems to go from a high point of, let's say, 830 to about 820. There's a 10-foot drop. Let's play it safe and use 20 feet of earth. Hit OK. Hit apply. And you see this topography surface just got thicker. And you can see here when I launch shaded view, it's green because the top layer is grass. And it's currently flat. If I take a look at the elevations here, you see that the top of the surface is at level 0. Level 1, the first floor, basically. That's the top of the topography here. Okay, let's go back to site plan. Okay, there we have it. So next, let's create some guidelines to show us exactly where the plot of land is that we're going to focus on, because it's hard to snap onto a Toposolid. So I'm going to make this transparent. And I'm going to grab some reference planes, architecture reference planes, and I'll draw some horizontal reference planes across the site. And I want them to describe the actual plot of land we're focusing on. So I will grab that green line there, and I will move it down with the arrow keys. You can see it sliding down there. If you hold shift, it'll jump faster when you're moving it up and down. But I need to put it right in the middle of this gray line here. That's the border on the north end of the site right there. Again, we're focusing on this parcel B and parcel A. The other line here is going to be slightly below that one. And then I'll draw another reference plane that's on an angle as best I can. Best to zoom in close and simply try to pick up this angle here. And I can draw it. If you can't quite get the angle right, you need to turn off your snap. you would do that under manage. And here's snap command, and you turn this button off. Or turn it on to turn off the snap, but I was pretty successful. I'm zooming out here and dragging that line out, and I'm dragging this line outward. I will zoom in and grab the little grip there, little dot, the grip of a reference plane, and pull it out. So there's the north and south end of the site. Here's the west end of the site. I need to draw a line that represents the eastern edge of the site. I will grab a reference plane, zoom in here, and I will draw it along this boundary here as best I can. I can zoom in closer, try to get on that red line there in the center, click on that line, click on the grip, and then zoom out to drag it out and make it longer on the north side here. So grab the little grip, there's a little blue dot there, click. Kind of sometimes hard to see. I will pull it out. And so here. So if I were to launch my shaded view, these lines, in between these lines is my actual site. All right, let's do this in black and white. For example here. So these reference planes allow me to snap to them in the future to set up some alignments. Another thing you can do is you can go here to property line, and I can create by sketching, and I can create a property line boundary on my site. So for example, here, I can draw a rectangle and then align it to my reference planes. And let's see how accurate I was here. Let's line these up and line this up to there. And basically that's the size of my site. This one is not cooperating with me. I'm going to use pick line and then TR for trim and trim these edges. There, and I've basically encircled the site with this property line. Okay, you can see here there's a property line right there. It's a bunch of dash slashes, typical property line symbol. Now I know of the approximate size of this site here. Let's take a look here. I'm looking at the PDF file. 96.95 feet. So let's take a look at here. So what I'll do is I'll do a measurement along this edge here, because as it turns out on the PDF, it says here that that edge here is 96.95 feet in length right there per the survey. So with that being said, let's make a measurement on this angle here. DI is for measurement. And then to grab that point there, use tab until it highlights the point, the corner. Tab, 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 tab. There's a point. Click. And then the next point is over here. Put your mouse on the corner. Tab, 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 tab. Little dot shows up. Click. And then I can pull out a measurement. There. Then I can grab the property line here. Click. And I can see if it's accurate here. And so here's the property line here. I can click on it. And unfortunately, it only gives me the measurement here that's vertical. It doesn't give me the one on the angle. So I guess what I can do is a little trick here. A little trick I'll do here is I'll grab a reference plane and I will snap it perpendicular to the property line right there. Little symbol for perpendicular. I will grab that line and move it to the corner. Exactly. I will offset that line 96.95 feet. And it should intersect where the property line should be. So here I will offset. And I will 96.65. And I will and actually, before I do that, let's make sure this line is actually in the right spot. So I click on this line here, zoom in really close, and you see it's not quite on the right spot. So I'm going to use the move command, grab the end of that line, and move it over to here. And now it's on the right location. And then here, I can copy it. So what I'll do is I'll use the copy command. I will grab this line here and then start, actually, copy command, grab the line, or grab the line, then copy command. Something I get this step incorrect. If you move your mouse, it'll pick up the parallel angle here. So you're drawing along that line there. We see the dotted line. And here I type 96.65, enter. And that'll put me where the property line should have been, which looks like I missed it. So I'm going to grab that line there and move it down here. And I'll grab that property line here, go edit boundary, and align it with this edge here. And hit OK. This is the danger with tracing PDF files. They're not entirely accurate sometimes. But this is the 96.65 feet along that edge there. Under the same token, I can grab a reference plane along this point here and copy it to my right. Let's see here. It's copied over 143.04 feet to the first parcel's intersection. This point right here. And then I need to copy it over an additional 181 foot 0.23 to that corner there. And so rather than doing the math, I'm simply just doing it graphically. I'll copy that line. I'll move it to the right. 181.23. And something doesn't seem correct. Let's double check. Let's do something a little more creative here. I will grab this line here. I will do measurements across here. This is where you can creatively use dimensions. So this one here is supposed to be, if my math is correct, although I see the problem, I think they're using 140. I'm using the wrong number. It should be 160 feet here, plus 164.31 there. I think those are the numbers I should be using here at the bottom. Those are the lot above. These are the lot below. So that's where my math went off the rails. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're saying here that this one, if I grab that number there, should be 164.31 feet. 164.31 feet. And this one here, this line here, click, that number should be, again, it seems rather odd, 160. It should, this line should be here, for example. Maybe I chose the wrong lot line. But again, this is where you can go through some trial and error and correct any mistakes. So let's go back and we'll do a wireframe here. Oh, yeah. I took the entire site over to here. It should have been over to here, this point here, which is my mistake. So this is correct. If I click on the property line and go edit the sketch, I can grab that line there and move it from that point to exactly that point there. And now it'll measure exactly correct. I can then take my reference plane and line it up with the property line. And then these numbers are now accurate based on the survey. I can now delete these. No longer any need for those. And next, I'd like to take my property line and make it a little bit thicker. So let's do that. So in order to manipulate the thickness of the property line, you need to go to VG, visibility graphics, right? You go graphic display option, this guy here, or VG shortcut. You go down the site here, open this menu. You find the property lines here and you override the line style. The projected line is a floor plan basically. So you override it here. And here you pick the pattern of the line. Usually, let's use a, you can use this one here. pick one that's similar to the style of the property line. So this one here, for example, center, hit okay. Here's the color. I want to make it red so it sticks out. And then here, the line weights, I can bump it up to 10 out of 16. Hit okay, hit apply, and you see the lines get exaggerated. And you can see exactly where the site is very, very quickly. And so from a distance, you can see that pretty well. Even with my shaded mode on, I can see my line weights are activated here at the top of the screen. So I can see that pretty easily. Okay, there's the site. Now, before we begin to manipulate the specific parcel we're working with, we want to build some of the context around the site, in particular, the street. So let's go back to wireframe again. And so here's the street here. Now, this is where I try to use the reference planes I drew to help me, to assist me in drafting the street. So here, there's a sidewalk outside the site here, outside the property line. Then there's some grass, and then there's the curb, and then there's the street. So if I grab that line there, so what I'll do here is I'll go back to my reference planes here, and I will, let's say I make a copy of the current reference planes 10 foot away from where it's located here. I believe that's close. Looks like it's almost there. Maybe another 2 feet. Let's copy it over 12 feet over. So there's a copy of the street, the property line, copied over 12 feet, and that's about where the curb is. And then there's the driveway. There's a street, and I can use the tape measure here and measure how far away the opposite curb is. It's about 50. Let's say it's about 52 feet away. So let's go back to reference plane and let's use that pick line command. Type 52, and it'll copy it 52 feet away. And so these lines here represent the width of the street going north and south, east and west. Grab my reference plane I drew earlier, copy it up, place it at about the location of the curb. Let's say it's there or something, and then measure this street. So a little tape measure here. We got a little street going on here that's about 24 feet wide. So grab that line, copy it straight down, 24 feet. Now, when you get to the intersection here, these curve. You see there's a curb right there, and there's a smaller curve right here, kind of curving around. Hard to see. There's a curb here that's circular, and there's another one there that's probably 20 feet. So, with that being said, again, I can go to black and white mode so I can see my site. Again, these two lines represent the road east-west. These two represent the road north-south. And so I need to create that street within my topography. So these lines will help me do that work in the future. I will not do it now. What I will do now is set up the height of the topography. I just need to see those reference planes before I do any additional work there. So the height is handled under massing and site. The topo menu, cancel that for a second. The topo menu does not have the options we need. So we'll need to click on the actual topography itself. Click. And then you'll gain access to a few additional tools here. These here called sub-elements. Sub-elements here to adjust the site accordingly. So this is going to get a little tedious, but I have the initial location of the roads, the site here that we're going to be building here, and the entire context around the site. So unfortunately, I do need to switch this back on to wireframe mode. And what's next to do is to basically draw these topographic lines here. There's no quick way of doing it. It's a matter of tracing, but it doesn't have to be completely as accurate as this current topography map we have in front of us. But it should show the major height changes across the site. So first you have to look at the drawing here and figure out, well, what will represent zero? Zero level. Is zero level at the bottom of the hill here at the street? This line here is 810 above sea level. So that's the height of that point there. This point here is 10 feet away from that point. This should be at 820. 810, 820, 830, going uphill. The top of the site is here, 840. And that's our neighboring property here. And so if I'm looking at this design, I probably want to pick a contour line within my land, within my property, and set it to 0. And so, for example, 820. This is right in the middle of my site here. We're going to call this location 0. So if this is 0, this one here is 10 feet lower than 0. This line here is 20 feet lower than 0. This is 0. This line here would be 10 feet higher than 0. So between 820 and 830, that's 10 feet. So if this was 0, for instance, this would be 10 feet higher. This would be another 10 feet higher than 0. So I drew the topography intentionally slightly bigger than the picture here. This is the outline of the topography. So before we start building out contours, let's go to the elevation view. Let's add a few more levels here. And so here, what we'll do is I'll go to architecture, pick a level. I'll pick a line, pick a line command. I'll choose 10 feet. And I will grab these points here and add a couple. Oh, by the way, I'm going to make a floor plan. And with the pick command there, make sure the floor plan is checked. Otherwise it turns black. 10 feet. And I will add a couple levels here. There. So I've got 4 levels. Each of these are 10 feet apart. I will then take my site and then I will assign it here to 0. So the top of the site, topo, is at 0 level. And what I'll also do is, I'm going to clear out my views here. I'm going to keep this view on the screen while I'm building a topography in my plan view. Here's my plan view, level 1. So I want to see both of these at the same time. So with these two visible, I'll go to view. I'll go to tile, and I'll basically show myself. This one here I don't need. That's another file. I'm going to close that. But here's the site plan, and here's a cross section at the same time. So I just want to show you this topography change. So the top of the topo is at 0. And on this drawing here, on the floor plan, I am going to take a look at the drawing, and we're going to call 820 0. So that would be 0 in the middle of my site. And then these lines here, that line there, that curvy line there is 10 feet higher. And this one here is 10 feet higher yet. It's 20 feet above that one. I'm not sure what this one is over here. I'm assuming it's the same as this one. I'm not sure. But here we can tell that this line here is 20 feet higher than 820, which is currently called 0. So on this drawing, I'll start the high end. I'll draw a peak up here, 20 feet higher. So I will go into, I'll click on my topography. I'll use add a point, and I'll use absolute from the current level. And I will type here 20 feet. So 20 feet higher than my current level, which is down here at 820, is this piece here. So I will click on the end of the topography here. and start plotting points along this edge here that represent a point 20 feet in the air. I'm going to connect these dots together across the way here because I believe they are the same. But I'll simply, and now grab the edge of the topography here at the very edge, click. And here in a section, you'll see what happened here. Part of the site here got taller. It got 20 feet taller. If I go to 3D, you'll see here, this area here got taller. Now let's close this for a second. And I can see here what I've done is I plotted these dots along these edges here, 20 feet in the air. However, one of these corners here, this corner here is dropping back down to the original 0. I want it to be 20 feet in the air. So we can click on this object, modify subelements. I can grab that point specifically and type 20 feet right here, right now, and move it up to 20 feet in the air. And now this entire area here is 20 feet in the air. Go back to site plan. Click on the topography. Use modify subelements, and you can see the path we chose. This path here, this area here, is 20 feet in the air. The one in front of it is 10 feet lower. This is 10 feet in the air. Again, we're starting at 820. We're going up to 830. That's a 10-foot change. These lines here should be 10 feet in the air. Grab the topo, add a point, absolute from the current level. We're going to add 10 feet. And now plot points starting at the very edge of the topo. Click. These points will now be 10 feet in the air as opposed to 20. And I'll do my best to kind of trace this shape here. Again, does not have to be perfect. I'm taking some broad strokes here. And you can always add more points at the same elevation to smooth out the topography. But here, I can go back to the edge of the site here. And those points are 10 feet in the air. Escape, escape. So when I go to 3D, there's now a change. This is 0. That goes up. It found a 10-foot height change, and then went up 20 feet to the other level. Again, if I cut a section through this lengthwise, or widthwise here, I should see a change in elevation between this flat area and these two points here. Double click. So you can see that the site's starting to change here. It went up to this level here, and that went up to that level there. So the heights are changing. This is 20 feet about right here. The top of this topography here is at 20 feet. Go back to my site. When I click on the section box, I can make sure it includes the entire site here. So when I'm looking in that direction, it shows me everything I need to see. If I turn on my shaded view, you can see what's happening to the site. This is the cross section. You can see the site slightly getting higher toward that top piece there, and that top piece is at 20 feet above 0. This here is 10 feet in the air, or this is what we're calling 0 right here. Now let's try a few topographies that are less than 0. Again, this is 820, that's 810. This is 10 feet below. This would be negative 10 feet below that line there. So I can start that line there, but I need an anchor, or else the site will slope between this line and that line there without giving me an 820 level. So I need both of these lines created. I need to set this line here as 0. I need to set that line there as negative 10 feet. So we need to trace them both. Click on topography, add an element, a point rather, absolute, make it 0, and then start sketching out where 0 is, which is 820. Start picking these points here. So here, I'm just going around the loop here, I'm taking some broad strokes along these long linear paths here. And again, you want to take these topography to the edge of the topo. So here, I clicked on the edge. Click on that point there. Make sure you terminate it at the edge. Okay, let's do some checking here. Click on the topo, modify subelement. What point is this at? This is at 0. Great. This one here should be, let's see. Well, this one hasn't been created yet. This is 820, which is at 0 as well. So honestly, I can make that one there. That's at 820 as well. Let's do that. Let's click on the topo, add points, and here, this little piece here is also at 820. So let's set that to 0. Pick some points here. Pick a point back there. Then modify cell element. That's 0. That's 0. This point is higher than 0. Should be higher than 0. Currently, this is this one here is at 830, 10 feet higher than 0. Let's make this higher. Let's make this 10 feet higher. This corner of the site higher. Otherwise, it's going to slope downward to 0. I think that it's actually higher than 0. And next, let's grab this one here. This is 10 feet lower. 820 is 0. This would be 10 feet lower. That'll be -10. Again, click on the topography, add a point, make sure it's absolute. From the level, make sure this is level, -10 feet. And then trace to the edge of the topo, -10 feet here. And start tracing these points. I'm taking some artistic license here, making most of these points completely straight, not picking up the curvature exactly as shown on these drawings. But the more points you add, the more accurate the topography becomes. But for the sake of this exercise, I'm just simply drafting very, very quickly and taking some broad strokes back to the edge here. Click. That is 820, which is, I'm sorry, 810, 10 feet below. Next one here is this one back there, and that is 10 feet below. That's at 810. So click here, modify subelement. So these points here are at 810. So these should all be, if I click here and modify any of these points here, they should all be at -10 feet, which is correct. Any one of these points are -10 feet. These points here should be -20 feet. Because 8, that's 10 feet. And that's it. Oh, this is also 810. Oh, this entire area back here is flat. This is 810. This is also 810. So, same rules apply. Modify subelement. Add points. -10 feet. And this area becomes a plateau. So here, these will all be at also -10 because that says elevation 810. So I will plot these points very, very quickly. Back up toward the edge of the site here and click. There. This point back here at the rear is 820, which is at 0. We call it 820 0. So this is at 0. So I'd make this 0 and plot these points starting at the edge. Actually, this should be the edge here. And then take it back to the edge of the site. Those are all 0. Click modify subelements. Grab the edges of the corners and make sure that they're set correctly. That's 0. And here, for example, if I modify subelements, I can get rid of that dot. I can just delete and it goes away. But those are, in broad strokes, the major contour lines every 10 feet. If I played my cards right, if I go to 3D, I should see something like this. This is the site. So you can see here, There's a bit of a flat piece here in the middle of the site. Let's go to site plan. Let's change this to wireframe. You can see here, this is rather hilly. Here, inside the site here, that's rather hilly. This is a big flat area here. And then I believe it goes downhill again. You can add the intermediate topography lines to make this a little more exact. So with that being said, this gives us a cross section that looks like this. It's flat here, it goes uphill, flattens up a little bit here, goes uphill up to the 840 mark here. So next, let's now draw the street. So what you can do here is go to modify and use the split element command. Click on that and click on the site. Click. Then draw the street with rectangles or any shape you like. So for example, if I draw a rectangle here and I draw a rectangle there, these are simply just sketches for the time being. And I can use the align tool and line up these drawings with the lines of the actual site here. Sometimes it doesn't cooperate with me. I'm going to use the pick line command and grab that edge right there. TR for trim. Don't worry about the fact that it's bigger than the actual topography. Again, I will split this line here so I can trim this corner and this corner independently. So that's the shape I want there. But I remembered that these edges here are curved. And so here I use this command here, fill arc, grab that edge and that edge, pull it back, and I can click on that number there and type 20 to make it exactly 20 feet. I'm not sure if that's right. Again, do this here, click, click, pull this back, make that maybe 10. And if you do that, it'll split the line. Now this street's actually inaccurate. I'm going to line this up here. These are inaccurate. And so that's 20 feet. That's a 10-foot radius. I believe the street cuts through here. Let's go back here and look at wireframe. The street does cut through there. So let's go ahead and add that through street. There's another street coming down here vertically here. Let's go ahead and do that as well. So back to wireframe. I'm going to grab these lines here and duplicate them and copy them way over there. Make sure I draw them straight. I am going to split line this here and do a TR for trim and trim these edges. And then I need to make sure this is closed. So I'm going to trim this. And then there's a vertical street here somewhere. I'm not sure where it's at. So I will take a peek, add wireframe, and then draw a rectangle that represents the street here. Let's just draw it like this. Close enough. And when I go back to hidden line, I can then split that street right there, cut that line right there, and then TR for trim and trim the edges and erase the parts I don't need. So, and then I believe that those streets are curving. So let's take a look. So here's the curvature here. That's 20 feet. I can grab that little dot there and pull it back and make the match a little more closely. Maybe that's 23 feet or something. This one, I can pull that back and make that one 20 feet, for example. This one here, again, I can barely see it there. I can do this fillet command with these lines here, and I can barely see the curve here, but it's appearing in my drawing. I believe that's right. So let's go there. And then here, see the purple lines there? I want to use the fillet command and fillet these two edges. And then there's one over here. So fillet this line to this line to get that curve there. And then click on the curve and you can make this exact, like let's say 20 feet. There's one little triangle here that I want to eliminate here. Let's go back to hidden line. This is a fillet 2. I don't know what the angle is unless I take a peek. And yeah, that's close enough. Let's click on that number and make this exactly 30 feet. Nice round number. Okay, so if I take a look at my drafting in hidden line, this is what I've drawn. I've drawn an object that's overlapping the topography, bigger, but this represents the streets. I'll hit apply or okay there, and it will cut out those objects. That's what the split element does. And it'll give me different areas to work with. This area here, this area here, this area here. Another thing I might want to do is carve out the actual site, because this includes my neighbor. And I can see there's something wrong here as well. I'm going to grab this modify sub-element and pick this here. That says negative 10 feet. Let's make this exactly the same. This is negative 10 feet to flatten out this little corner there. So I want to carve out my site as well. So go to site here. And then again, let's do this with wireframe. And I'm going to use my property line here. So I will go into the modify command, split element, grab this piece of land here, click on it, and then use the trace command or the pick line command and trace my property lines along the edges. Take a look at it in hidden line, make sure I got all the edges. There's all the edges. Accept it. Now when I go to 3D, I've carved out that area as well, right there. So for graphical purposes, I can duplicate this Toposolid. I can call it John's property. Here, I'll just make it John's property. And I'll grab this grass here and change it to a different type of grass. Here's my materials library. I can pop this open here. Again, these are the materials that are in my computer. These are the materials that are in my project. And the idea is to take them from one and place it in the other if you don't have the material you're after. I'm going to do a search for grass. I'm using the one here, but they have another one here called plant. Let me use that one, move it up. It's here. I'm going to click on this button here, render appearance. It's a darker shade of green, this one here. And I'll use that one for my actual property. So that one is a little bit different than the other topography. And you can see it's slightly different. So now my property stands out. I can see the difference between the neighbor's property and my property. I grab the street. I duplicate it. I call it maybe John's Street. And rather than using grass, I will use asphalt. And here's asphalt pavement. I'll move that up. Double click. So now I got a new topo called asphalt. There. I will probably modify it to the topography is this gray color. I can change that color here, make it a little bit darker, hit apply, and it stands out now. See there? Now, as you're all aware, typically a street is lower than the adjacent land, the adjacent grass, sidewalks, what have you. So what I can do here is I can grab this cross section that represents the street here, and I can make it 10 inches narrower. I can just simply shave off 10 inches, or I'm sorry, 6 inches from this earth, make it 19'6", as an example. And it'll be that much narrower. It'll be 6 inches below, and that will represent the curb. When you zoom in here, you'll see it's slightly lower. When I click on it, I also want to make it, I want to move it down here, the height offset, I want to move it down -6 inches to slide it downward. And there'll be a change in elevation right there between the grass and the street. How you handle that edge is through drawing a curb. That's handled with another video. But that gets you the street to be slightly below the grass or the adjacent land. And then when it comes to sidewalks, that's a little bit easier. And by the way, I mean, that strip of land is outside the property line, but there is a driveway. So you need to probably carve out a little area here for a driveway and decide what material to make out of it. But before we get there, let's go back to the site. Let's go back to wireframe. And you'll notice here that there are sidewalks here along the edge of the property here, which is great because I've got these reference planes here that I can constantly reuse to build anything I like. For instance, sidewalks. So for example here, let's say there's a 5-foot setback and a 5-foot sidewalk as an example. So I can go back to my reference plane here and pick lines and type 5 feet. And let's set back this 5 feet here for the grass and another 5 feet. This little gap here between that line and that line will represent the sidewalk, future sidewalk. Again, along this street, I believe the sidewalk is sitting right on top of the property line right there. So it's kind of hard to see. But let's do the same math again. 5 feet and 5 feet. Let's grab this line here and duplicate it. 5 foot down for some, not that one, this one. 5 feet down for some green space. And then 5 feet down for the actual sidewalk. And those are my reference planes I can use to build that sidewalk. Notice here that there's a driveway here. We'll ignore that one. But this is the steps you can take to build sidewalks. Something that sits on top of the grass. If it's below the grass or even with the grass, then you probably want to use the split command like we did the street. But if it sits on top, it's easier to use the following command. So let's take a look here at the hidden line. So this is the sidewalk here. These lines here are the sidewalk, these two. And the sidewalk's coming across this way. That line and that line, that's going to stay green. So to build a sidewalk, on top of this topography, this Toposolid, I click on the Toposolid and you can see its information here. By the way, you can always reset this to normal. You can use reset shape and everything goes back to 0. Everything goes back to the original shape you drew if you needed to do that work. But what I want to do here is I want to go to Masking and Site, Topography, and I want to do something different here. What I want to do is click on the topography here and use Subdivide command, and then sketch out the sidewalks. So with the rectangle tool here, this time it does have to be inside of the topography. So I'm going to draw a rectangle right here along the entire length of the site. Let me pull it out to the street. I will use the pick line command and pick these edges here, which represents the sidewalk. I will grab that edge here. I will TR for trim these corners. I got to trim out these corners here with split line so that I can type TR and trim. You see, I can trim those corners without losing that line. So I'm going to draw this. I'm going to trace that. I'm going to trim these edges here, erase. And then down this way here, I need to stop this at the end of the topo. I need to basically cut it off right here at the end. So what I've done is I've drawn this. Hover over one of the lines, use tab, click. That shape was drawn on top of the topography. If I accept it and go to 3D, I wind up with this object here. It's a 3D model that sits on top of the topography in the shape of the drafting that I created. And then here, I could modify its materials. So for example, I can make it concrete, for example, here. Lightweight concrete. And then here, I can decide how high is it above the grass. Let's say it's only 2 inches above the grass. So now it looks like a sidewalk, and it is actually higher than the grass. What you cannot do is make this a negative number, which is why we can't use it for the street. We can't depress it into the grass. If that's the case and that's what you're after, you have to click on this topo solid and use split element command to do that work. All depends on what you want to do. And so here is the site. There's a sidewalk, there's a street, all the neighboring properties. Feel free to add as many additional details and elements you want to add to this context model. But your property that we're working with will be this one here. And this is where you'll build your design. That's the intention of this site model. Okay, so let's take a peek at what it looks like again as the final version. So here is an example. Let's see, which one of these is it? I've closed the file. Let's open the file. So here we have an example of all the work I just described. There's the site. I go to 3D view. There you can see the street, the sidewalks. I have not added curbs to this drawing, but nice thing about these subdivisions is that they follow the contours of the topography that beneath them, and they sit on top. So if you don't like them, you can delete them without having to repair the topo solid, and they can be a separate material. So these are a concrete material. So here, for example, there's the building next door from the site map. There's the building pad, and I cut them off from this new driveway I've added here. I added this driveway here. Obviously here you need to cut through the land here to get to the street. But I added this driveway here, and I leveled out this pad here, which is honestly a floor. And I built a sidewalk on top of that, flat. And then I built these units adjacent to the sidewalk. So in this design, I've taken advantage of the topography by building a 2-floor building, a single floor in the front, double height space in the rear. There's some work that had to be done here to make sure that land is below that window. But this is an example of what you want to create. You want to avoid creating very large retaining walls. Like for example here, there's a retaining wall right there because of the slope change between the top of this grass and the top of the adjacent site. You don't want that wall to be very high. That's a very expensive proposition. I would try to avoid, I would try to keep those retaining walls under ideally 10 feet. Although that makes for a very tall wall. Smaller the better. 5 feet is great. Try to avoid making very tall retaining walls. Here's a little wall here below the building. Not a very tall wall, but it's below the building, and it creates a foundation wall below that first floor. So this takes advantage of the topography in the design. If I can do a cross section through here, you can see what's happening here. There's the parking lot. There's the sidewalk. There's the first level of the building, a few steps up. And then here's a whole floor beneath you. And here is the retaining wall here that's very short. You do not want these walls to be higher than 10 feet, ideally 5 feet. But try to take advantage of the land and work with what you have without having huge retaining walls in your design. And here's a little wall here stopping that land along the southern front of the driveway. So here's a quick example of how this project can be done. Okay, so I'll leave that to you to continue this process and watch my next video regarding adding curbs and what have you to the site. Okay, take care.